And I speed down this tunnel, and in the process of this rematerialization, I become smaller and smaller and more compact and more crushed and tinier until I am uncomfortably compacted inside this divine being that then, like an ice screw, stabs me into this body and screws me in right into myself. And I have this experience of being like a genie in a bottle, like huge, immense power, teeny tiny living space, and I'm forced inside this, and I don't want it, because entering into this thing was entering into suffering. I had no pain in heaven. There was only healing and wholeness and oneness and beauty and bliss. Pain wasn't forgotten. It didn't exist when I was in the united state. Now I'm inside this thing, and I'm like trapped in this container, and I'm awake in this container like, what is this? Where was I? What's going on? And then my brain comes back online.
It was a rough moment, I can tell you that. And I remember that moment of coming out of that experience and kind of being reconnected with the physical world and looking around and feeling the cold and feeling this kind of burning ice burn sensation in my lungs, but taking a deep breath, and there was almost a moment of disappointment. Well, that was something to look forward to. And then it was quickly kind of whisked away by something that I can't even attempt to describe, but effectively it took that sense of disappointment and said, not yet.
So how I returned to my body, nobody asked me if I wanted to come back. I didn't have a chance to say yes or no. I sure would have said no. I don't want to go back, but nobody asked me. I was just, all of a sudden, I was thrust back into my body. I have to say it's one of the most painful experiences I've ever had because it was so dense. I was laying on the ground and I felt heavy. I felt sick, and I laid there for at least 3 hours before I even did anything. I was so out of it and not happy to be back.
Did I just have a baby? I could not remember that I had been there to have a back surgery. That's how befuddled my brain consciousness was. But at the same time, my spiritual consciousness that had just been through this near-death experience was recalling everything in complete and sharp relief, and in addition was filled with the same love and peace and bliss that I had experienced all during my near-death experience. I was filled with it as though I was in a protective bubble. And I just knew the truth of everything that I was remembering had just happened.
It was kind of a letdown for a minute coming back. I mean, I was relieved that my parents would understand that I was okay. I was back. But the doctors are so funny in the hospital because you came from this tremendous high where you really, really felt to me like my home. It's just beautiful. And then, of course, you're back in the reality of a aching, small little anchovy can, they're stuffed. You're back in this little body again of flesh and bones. And it was like, oh, man.
The light itself, now this enormous, infinite light, spoke in unison, and it said, this is not your time. You must return. And I said, no way. I've got a family that I didn't know existed that loves me and is supporting me. I know that body is back there and it's broken. And I don't mean to sound crass, but it just looked like cold meat to me. And I had no desire to go back to that body. And so I argued with what I perceived as God. I argued. Didn't do me much good because you can see I'm here. But I did. I argued with, and the voice came back and it said one more time, it said, you must return, you have a purpose. And that word purpose just resonated through my being. How is the enormity of me going to fit in there? And so another wave hit the Zodiac, and when it did, the Zodiac had a little bit of air left in one of the pontoons and it popped up. And when it did, it cinched that line around my arm and it pulled my arm up, actually dislocated my shoulder and thumb, and I'm watching it. I'm not feeling it, but I'm watching it happen, and it pulled my body up to the surface. And so myself and my 3 soul family members, we rose up with it, and we were observing this as my body got tangled up in the wreckage of this zodiac, and another series of waves hit it, and when it did, it was pounding my body up against the zodiac, and some of that salt water got pushed out of my lungs, and my family gave me a gentle push, and I came back into my body.
And so I decide to go back, and as soon as I make the decision, the light starts pulling back and I start pulling away, and I immediately become frantic, like shaking and crying, and God's like, it's okay. And I said, wait. And so he stops, and I said, just let me remember it. Because I'm worried if I go back and I can't remember it, I'll lose all hope. And I wake up, and I'm in this hospital room, and this nurse is standing there, and I was astonished. I hadn't expected. It was like this sudden throw back into your body, right? And it was crazy. Like all of a sudden I had density again. That really sucked. And my whole body hurt. I mean, I'd been in a coma and on a ventilator for like 5 days or something. The nurse is sitting there, and immediately I say, I was with God. And she's like, oh, that's nice, dear. And she taps my hand, and I'm like, no, I mean, just a minute ago, I was with God, like God, the God.
I didn't have to figure out how do I go back. It was in the intention. It was in the intention of thinking I'm going back. As I did so, I found myself wandering around a hospital. And I was just marveling at this experience until I came up to a man or a body laying on the gurney that I didn't feel anything from, which I thought was weird. And so I stepped closer and took a look, and that's when I realized, oh my goodness, that's me. But it wasn't me. I was having this incredible connected experience, but there was my body. There was, that skin suit that I had been wearing around life. And it was incredibly sad because my body was a wreck. I've taken for granted that I'm healthy and can run and be athletic and feel good, and yet there was my body so broken. A couple of things were huge for me in that, and that is that I'm not my body. I was something far greater. And then also, I had peace, even in the trauma of everything that had happened, by being out of this situation. And I also realized, too, that dying, was very natural. It was very beautiful. Many might say that I suffered a very violent, traumatic death, in the car accident and all the injuries and everything that had happened, but I wasn't even aware of the injuries. But I also knew I've got to get back in. I've got to get back in that body and carry on. I've got to live for my son. And once again, there was no figuring it out. It was intention. I'm going back in, and then boom, I was back in the body. But when I went back into the body, the heaviness and the regret, the guilt, the pain, the trauma, all of that.
Because at that moment, I heard that inaudible voice say to me, you need to go back. And that's not what I wanted to hear. No, I don't want to go. Please don't make me go back. Because it was so beautiful there. And then I heard the voice again, and I get emotional about it even now. I heard the voice again. It said, you need to go back. And it was loving, but it was a firm voice letting me know that this was not a negotiation. It was time to go back. And I persisted with the protesting. I said, no, please don't make me go back. And right at that moment, I felt almost like I was nudged back into the tunnel. And I went backwards very fast into the tunnel, very quickly back into my body. And I entered my body through the top of my head, and it felt like I was being sucked back into my body. And I felt the pain returning, but it was very quick. It was just enough for me to know I'm back in this world. And then I don't remember anything for several hours after that. When I woke up in pre-op, this was on a weekend, and it was very late at night. I think it was at about 9 or 10 p.m. That part of the hospital was very empty. I knew that I had died. I knew that I had gone into this beautiful white light that loved me. But when I opened my eyes, I was receiving last rites. And I thought, this is odd. And it didn't make sense to me. And I was also trying to understand what was going on around me. I was trying to figure out what the physical world was about, because it was almost like I had lost the memory of what these machines were and what all these people were doing.
And I was reaching for the hand that was coming through that cloud. And before I knew it, that arm pulled back and said, "It is not yet your time. You have more things yet to do." And I'll never forget that, because it was word for word. It is not yet your time. You have more things yet to do. And I never saw the hand again. I never heard another voice again. The next thing I knew, I was in my body, laying on the table as they were wheeling me out of the operating room. And I was having a war within my body. I didn't want to come back, because what I saw was colors that I have never seen before. I saw love that I had never felt before, and that I had never shared with other people before. And I felt peace.